Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CMO Battle Ring, Battle Royale that we are bringing together. I see that many of you are joining in. So maybe as I explain the rules of engagement for today and bring in our speakers, maybe just drop a note with your name, where you're coming from, what are you most excited to discuss today? Just a little bit of a check-in on the chat. We want to make it as interactive as possible. So do please use the chat, share your own opinions as we are discussing them, as we're going to go through the next 45 minutes, 60 minutes on engagement, and have fun while bringing insightful opinions and perspectives from our speakers. So you already know who's joining in. It's a battle ring. A few things beforehand. I'm going to be bringing in the different speakers. We're going to have an initial baseline conversation just to have an understanding of how we see the CMO role today. And then we're going to go into some of prepared statements that I have for them. Someone is going to open that statement. The other ones can rebut or debate back or challenge back. And then we also, feel free to share your own opinion. So having said that, do feel free to use the public chat and to, say where you're coming from, your name, what brings you here. In the meantime, I'm going to start bringing the speakers and the panelists, or let's say the wrestling CMOs or marketing experts. I'm going to bring in an S-way since it's a battle royale. I'm going to try to do it in an announcing format. Let's see if I have a career or this or not. But having said this, first one, out of the shadows of LinkedIn politeness, stepping into the ring with a flamethrower and a vendetta against the attribution nonsense of this world. He has burned more playbooks than he has read. And if you're still optimizing for MQLs, you are already on his hit list. Give it up for the rogue king of go-to-market warfare, Clark, burn it down, Baron.
How's it going?
Welcome.
How's it going, Hugo? How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for taking the challenge and joining us. It's going to be fun. I can see
yeah, absolutely, man.
Charlotte.
I'm super pumped.
Yeah, and it's 7 a.m. in Alabama, US. Great time to be up, ready to go. Let's bring up our second speaker. So she has scaled startups. She has crushed acquisition targets. She has built go-to-market engines that actually generate revenue. If your funnel is leaking, she'll find it. If your orbs are bloated, she'll cut it. Ruthless with data, leader with process. Make some noise for the execution queen herself, Jolene. No noise, just growth. Van Grieken. Welcome, Jolene.
Hey. Thank you. So happy to be here.
Bio.
I love the intro. I'm gonna put this on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, and then last but not least, also in Europe, but more coming from France, he has built, scale, and outpaced most playbooks before even generative AI was even a hashtag. So part founder, part fractional go-to-market AI, all futuristic. If you're still A/B testing landing pages, he has already shipped the next 10. Entering the ring with algorithms in his corner and no patience for laggards. Give it up for David Arno. There you go. Woohoo!
Thanks a lot. Good to be here.
All
good
right.
to see everybody.
Good to see you all. Thanks for coming in. I see that there is quite some good engagement from the chat. Thanks for everyone for engaging. So we are here today, and I'm going to go straight into the topic, which is the fact that there has been quite a fair amount of conversation on the CMO role and marketing leadership overall. Different takes, especially on LinkedIn, everything is dead nowadays. But in your perspective, why do you believe we are having this conversation? Why is the CMO role under such scrutiny right now? And in your view, what does the CMO actually own today? And maybe to get started, let's start by the last one that joined in. So David, why don't you get started by sharing your thoughts on this?
Yeah, okay. So for me, we're on a new technological S-curve since November 2022, GPT AI, generative AI, et cetera. And I've been in the AI field since about 2016. So I see this one as a cataclysmic change. I think the CMO role is quietly disappearing. It's not same wine, different bottle this time. Traditionally, so part of me thinks we're going back to the 1950s, 1960s, and then another part of me thinks we're just agentic orchestrators at the moment. I guess the traditional CMO role was the brand storyteller, part campaign strategist, part data analyst, stuff like that, right? You manage big teams, big budgets, even bigger PowerPoint decks a lot of the time, depending on the size of the company. And now it's definitely becoming like all functions an AI native function. I mean, look, you just gave some intros for all four of us, right? You probably ran those through some sort of LLM to come up with it, right? So it's co-intelligence at the moment. And I'm working on transformation programs within marketing departments and marketing teams where it's going further than just augmentation, where it's actually going into full-blown automation. I try to live not in the present, but 2 years from now, not 5 years from now, but like 2 years from now. 2 years from now, the CMO's role is completely different, orchestrator of smart agents and a lot less humans, to put it bluntly. So the CMO's toolkit, it's being replaced by these autonomous or semi-autonomous agents, multi-agent threading, who don't guess and don't need a 98-day plan to execute. In terms of strategies and tactics, I think those are changing a lot. At the moment, I'm all in on, like the old playbook of product-led growth, PLG, A/B testing, CRO works less and less, and I feel like we're going back to analog. We see a lot of the offline stuff, out-of-home stuff work a lot better than it used to. Just because from a digital point of view, we feel a little bit fried, and the attention economy is pulling us to a certain extent away from digital because it feels a bit cooked. But just to wrap it up, some of the stuff I'm excited about in terms of tactics from a CMO point of view are like the micro influencer flywheels. I think those work really well. Why? Because we're trusting what's on a lot less, what's on social media a lot less, and love shitty click-through rates on email and on search. Search is being eaten up alive by LLMs. So the new form of search is actually agent to agent, A to A. A lot of the decision-making process, the vendor selection, is actually happening inside LLMs. I can maybe talk a little bit more about that later. And I'm all in on GTM multi-agent org charts. Anything that's off-platform, offline seems to be working well at the moment. And then really, I'm also semi all in on community-first approach to own the community, own the platform, own your audience.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. Maybe looking from a different perspective, like what would you say that resonates and you feel that it makes sense from your own perspective, and why do you think that might be a different take on the CMO role and why we are talking about so much about it today?
You want to me to go into mine, or I gotcha. So I totally get where David's coming from. I think there's a gross lack of humans in that equation, which we can certainly get into. But I try to look at things from the granular level, dollars and cents, pipeline, all the traditional stuff. But I try to take a completely different approach and just look at it. And I really hate the term holistically, but just so far radically outside the box. And that's where like burn it down comes from. I think that one of the main reasons we're having conversations like this is because the CMO isn't a CMO anymore. I don't mean to say that the CEO is really the CMO. I'm saying that the CMO is just not what it is anymore. And I think the majority have come to terms with that. But I'm of the notion that we can always dig deeper, because a lot of the solutions I've seen to it just don't really get to the core problem. We're standing here as glorified KPI compliance officers trapped in some political decoy role and held accountable for outcomes that we can't actually control or affect in any meaningful way, depending on whatever nonsense metrics that some vendor just made up out of thin air. We're using tools that nobody wants to use. All the intent data, all of that stuff is just laundered, consent data. It's all the same. And, if everybody's saying the exact same thing, then no one is saying anything. And so I'm trying to, again, cliche, but like break through the noise, really just like not break through the noise, but decipher the encrypted code and just really get to the root of the problems. Another reason I think it's under scrutiny is because that title, it still to a degree implies authority, but the job has become this weird amalgam, this hostage negotiation between vendor pressure, executive delusion, and marketers, like actual operators, ICs that are begging to do actual marketing while they're just drowning in these nonsense metrics just because they have to keep their job. You also asked during this question, what does a CEO or a CMO actually own today? Blame.
We're going to elaborate on that on the exact next one, but maybe picking up on that blame, Jolene, do you reckon the same, that it owns blame, or do you think is an excuse?
I think it's twofold. First of all, I think we need to be very clear. We're talking mostly about B2B marketeers, because I think storytelling and selling products is a different way of doing marketing than being as B2C, you're forefront of selling marketing. When you're B2C, you're the engine that actually drives sales and revenue instead of a more supporting role. I think it's twofold. On one hand, I agree a little bit with Clark that it's always easy to blame marketing. On the other hand, I also feel that a lot of people are loving the victim role within marketing. So because they don't want to look into attribution, what I see a lot is that a lot of marketers don't really understand the product that they're selling because it's quite technical, or they're not close to sales or to product. They live in their own marketing brand bubble sometimes. And then they stay in that bubble and don't really want to go into anything revenue driven. Like, well, we just do MQLs and that's where we're done. I think for me, the CMO should sit in front on the GTM function. And I totally agree with David. It's going to change. I don't think it's going to disappear. I think through AI, being authentic is going to be more and more difficult. You can copy products, you can copy strategy, you can copy anything, but the only thing they can't copy is creativity, authenticity, and empathy. So that's something AI is not good at. And I think where you're going to stand out with your product or your service is through those things, because all the other things you can copy. So I think the role, is it called CMO? I don't know, but the role of standing out as a brand and being different is going to be at the forefront.
Okay, so picking up from that one, and because the first statement goes very much into it, and I think you already mentioned all elements of it, but I actually want to expand before you get into more details. And I'm going to bring it up here I think there's a way to bring it up. Yeah, there you go. So the modern CMO is dying, or is an endangered species. The role as we know it won't exist in 3 years. Yeah, so that's one of the things that was shared in one of the LinkedIn posts that they really want to see a discussion on this. I'm going to bring back to David, because he was already embracing on this topic of, the CMO is going to be an AI orchestrator per se. Is the CMO role really going to be out in 3 years' time, and is going to be AI orchestration only, or, what exactly is your take here?
Yeah, first of all, I hate titles. I think they're very boring. It's not about titles anymore. It's about jobs to be done. We can be super radical. I had this little post the other day where I said the product manager is the new CTO, and then RevOps is actually the new CCO and the new CMO, because they're going to be doing this orchestration of agents. Crew AI expert is the new COO and CHRO, and anyone who understands what the hell I'm talking about is basically the new CEO. It's a bit violent, but I don't know. Look, long story short, you'll always need somebody whose head is on the chopping block for marketing KPI. So I don't know if it'll be called a CMO or whatever it is. What I'm seeing, however, is that the way the role will need to evolve, and what I'm seeing a lot on the market as well, is that there's huge lack of originality and huge lack of risk taking. So it's, if you want to stand out, you need more of that originality and risk taking, whether it's because of internal forces or it's just an overall lack of creativity. It's really hard to name some creative campaigns out there or some creative approaches. I mean, just please try to don't name Burger King, right? Or don't name Supreme, and especially in the B2B space. And so I actually think that the role will change. We are going to become orchestrators of this human machine collaboration. Look, let me just give 2 examples. First example, I'm working on a project at the moment where we are, for a B2B enterprise, we're looking for signals in the market of potential buyers. because at any given point, you got 3 or 4% of the market that actually wants to buy your service or your product. And if you're in Europe, people only buy 90 days out of the year because we're on holiday half of the time, and the rest of the time we're on weekend, and mentally we're not there on Monday or on Friday, right? And so this engine would not have been possible without these agents. The engine basically scrapes the entire internet, looking for 10 or 15 key signals, feeds us back those signals, and then builds ABM, that's account-based marketing tactics for outreach and for sales assets that's catered to that customer. This wouldn't have been possible like a year ago at this level, and that's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing because we can be delivering our amazing product to the right people at the right time. If you look at YC, Y Combinator, the last batch, they would spend about 2 months on building, 1 month on go-to-market on trying to sell. Nowadays, they spend about 2 weeks on building, and then they spend about 2 months on go-to-market with maybe 10x the results that batches would have had 2-3 years ago. Why? Because everything is automatable. You can run these cold outreach campaigns with Apollo and Clay to the right buyer at the right time, all automatically. And I think that's beautiful. And to Jolene's point, I actually agree. It's going to be all about creativity and authenticity. And for me, like the most important things for the CMO moving forward, it's agentic architecture, understanding it. So not just a human org chart, but also agentic architecture. Prompt engineering, that's where you can start feeding the creativity and the taste. And then expertise. What do you actually feed the machines, which is linked to good taste. And that's linked to cultural curiosity. So if I have 3 kids, I'm trying to get them as culturally curious as possible at the moment, because now that we're all sort of glorified prompters, let's say, having a rich vocabulary and cultural references is more important than anything. I have a small venture studio, and we're releasing a bunch of small apps and tools, and we're going full maximalist design or brutalist UX designs. Just knowing those words, right? Knowing those to be able to make that decision and having that, what we call eval, or that good taste, I think will be more important than anything else moving forward. So that's why, to a certain extent, we're back to like the 50s or the 60s, going a little bit more analog, a little bit more offline, and then not investing time in technical skills, but more in sort of cultural skills.
Okay. Hearing that, and knowing that you said at the beginning, you tend to live 2 years ahead. Yeah, you try to think about 2 years or 3
That's
years.
presumptuous.
Presumptuous. Yeah. Jolene, Clark, do you want to rebut back? Do you want to push a little bit back on this thinking, or give a different alternative or a different perspective?
I can, but Clark can also start, whatever.
I was going to tell you to start.
Okay, no, I can go, definitely.
Go for it.
He's busy.
For me, I think there's a
making notes.
I think there's a massive difference between, of course, now and in 3 years, but also, to be honest and be very frank, I'm Dutch, so I love to be honest. We're all living in our bubble. We work with a lot of more old school tech companies that have a product but have no idea how to do anything online, right? Still, most of their administration is still offline, and I in the end, everything will change. Will it be in the next 3 years already? I don't know. I do think that setting yourself up for success, as David says, so get to know how to work with AI agents, setting yourself up to succeed is going to be very helpful. But I think we are going to go back to the human element. Like, of course, everything is going to be copyable, but it's all going to be the same crap. Excuse my language, right? Same type of campaigns, same kind of like saturation on channels. Everything's going to be different. So I think the most important thing is like knowing who you're, like, I think we go back to who is your audience, really is your audience? What are you selling? How do you sell it? And nailing that and building your messaging. And then you can do that through AI, but you need to know indeed who you're selling to and be creative about that, because I think otherwise you're not going to stand out in this this world anymore. But I do like what David said about Rev Ops being a new CCO, CMO. I do think you really need a creative person at the top who understands brand, who understands people, who can read people, who has then somebody under him who can be more like a Rev Up engineer who can go through all the work with all the AI agents, because I've not seen a lot of the times where somebody is extremely creative combined with very technical, analytical. Those are unicorns and they're hard to find. So that's my take.
Okay, Clark, any final say, especially because I see all these elements of it, and there's an element of messaging and brand that is not brought up, as part of it, at least not in this conversation. Is that something, because I saw on some of your last articles also talking about that. Is there an element that is missing, or is there anything else that that you want to bring on that is a different perspective?
It depends on who you ask, what's being talked about or what's not being talked about. And I think what David mentioned is a prime example of that. At no point did I hear the word buyer, audience, brand, or if I'm mistaken, even human. That notion of just looking for signals and like these little hand raisers, like it's just a hand raiser. It's what old school salespeople from the 80s have been talking about this entire time. It's just the new thing to call the thing that's always been that thing. Everybody wants the person who's ready to buy your shit right this second, and it doesn't matter what you call it. And the two schools there are folks that are all in on the RevOps, the intent data, the signals, the clay tables, and all it, like whatever dystopian hellscape we live in, where we're de-anonymizing people without them even filling out forms or declaring any kind of intent whatsoever on their website, and completely violating their right to browse the internet in private. And we're slamming as much cold outreach, AI generated this and automated that down their throats, that like David, I get it. I totally get it. But there's a reason that buyers, particularly in B2B, are running from you as fast as they possibly can. And that's why. And like I'm interested, like I know you got the project you mentioned, the signals, and you're talking about who's in market at any given time. Totally get that. But when I hear value propositions or pitches like that are trying to differentiate in this sea of vendors and projects that are going on, how is what you mentioned any different from anything that any other ABM vendor on the market claims to do? It's just wild to me, because at the end of the day, you're all just going about it in different ways, not really, one, revealing how the sauce is made, and two, admitting that all of that data comes from the exact same, like, 4 data co-ops that are just laundering all this data from your own CRM and selling it right back to you and calling it intent. And just like, here's your hand raisers. And that to me is what I mean by digging so far deep into what we're scared to talk about, because we're so far in bed with all of these vendors that are saying that basically a CMO can literally outsource their entire job. Like, if you have a vendor that knows our pain points as marketing leaders, knows that we have to keep our jobs, and everybody wants hand raisers. They want qualified pipelines. Some marketing teams are being held accountable for closed won revenue, for God's sakes. Like, is this marketing anymore? And then all of these vendors, whether it's cashing in on buzzwords like signals or intent or agentic or whatever, it's all the same shit that just says, here's what you need to keep your job, instead of making you and your team better at marketing. My value proposition to you, the CMO, is plausible deniability. And that's where the problem is.
I'm going to pick up on that, because I think there's can be David, have a chance for David to also share a little bit back, but I'm going to do it in the format of another statement, which is around the intent, which is intent, attribution. They're not interconnected, but at the end of the day, a lot of the intent tools are helping out for the marketeers to say that, yeah, it's attributed to marketing, it's attributed to our efforts. If you talk to marketeers, most of them says attribution is broken. But without it, marketeers can't prove they belong in the room, or at least that's always a conversation at the end of the day. CEO or board wants to know what is marketing bringing to the table, even if it's proven or not. So with that, and I'm going to continue on you, Clark, and then move to David and Jolene, which is, you talked about intent, you talked about the signals, but what's the alternative? And if attribution is broken and marketeers can prove they belong in the room, then how do they prove themselves?
Building long-term sustainable brands, there are ways to track that, to attribute that. And I'm not just talking about putting a blank form fill on a form that says, how'd you hear about us? Like, technology is fighting back from a different angle, as it were. Now, believe me when I say that I don't trust vendors as far as I can throw them, but there are a lot of conversations that are trying to bring back what is actual marketing and present that in a way that is not simply trying to, like you said, prove that they belong to be there. Marketing, when done properly, for example, demand gen teams are now responsible for BDRs and whatnot. We have account executives that don't want to hunt anymore. So it's really weird when I'm playing marriage counselor between sales and marketing teams, and I walk in and say, has anyone realized that, like, inbound, outbound, like, marketing's responsible for every dime this company makes? Like, no one sells, there's no founder led. And that's when jaws hit the floor, because everything that their marketing team is being measured on, all of this attribution, all of that stuff that you're talking about, it doesn't reflect how your audience actually feels. And Jolene, this is kind of where we start to bleed into AI versus human stuff, like what it can and can't do, context, nuance. You can never get as good a signal from any other vendor out there as you could if you just talked like human being to your audience, and like actually listened to them. But as far as proving that marketers need to be in the room anymore, I choose violence all day long on that, because that's not a conversation worth having. Like, the same could be said for anybody. The core issue here is KPIs and metrics that really don't mean anything. No one can agree what they actually mean on. And if there are all these terms and goals that marketing supposedly has that no one can actually agree on the definition of, and what actually defines these metrics, then they don't exist.
You mentioned Jolene, David, do you want to take I'm not going to say a swing because it sounds very violent, but a swing back.
Clark did say he wanted to be in the hospital or in jail, right? No, I'm joking.
Yeah. So go for it. David, do you want to go, or Jolene, do you want to take on the neck?
You go. David can do. I think that you need to have some form of alignment within your company on metrics and on KPIs.
Sure.
Yes, building a brand is important, the most important, but brand building, as we all know, hopefully takes time. It's not something you do in a night, but you need to look at early indicators and signals in order to move forward. For me, if the SDRs would report to me, I would love that, because that makes me responsible for a bigger portion of the revenue funnel. I want to be next to sales, or almost owning sales, because we're all responsible for the same thing. What I always feel so frustrated with is when I talk to marketers or to salespeople, like, you're not delivering me the right leads, and you're not pushing my leads forward. I'm like, we're all responsible for revenue here. We're all responsible for bringing in money in the end of the day. Maybe the channels are slightly different, but we're all reaching out to humans with a message to say that they need to buy our product. In essence, that's what we do. If it's in the beginning of the funnel, at the end of the funnel, customer success is the same in that sense, right? We're all just one big loop, in my opinion, from one to the end. And I would stop the discussion. Like, for me, I would happily have sales under me. It means that the message that I'm sending out is aligned across the board, and that I have control over it. So for me, that's
oddly enough, Jolene, I actually agree with you. I don't like that it just happened.
Yeah.
But if it's gonna happen,
let it sit behind me.
I'll steer that ship. Yeah.
Yeah, I would rather do that. So, but the AI is going to take over in some form or way. Not everything, but we can't not. Like, marketeers putting their head in the sand are stupid. Like, yeah, I can do this without AI. I'm still better than AI. In some forms you are, but you can make your life so much easier if you use the right AI agents to, to take off a lot of the pressure, because indeed marketing needs to take over a lot of work in different fields. So I would use AI in whatever way I can. I already do it at the moment. And there will be some roles that I think cease to exist, or it will change. Like, if you know how to prompt the right way, you're going to get way further than if you know how to write copy, because that's at one point just going to cease to exist.
Yeah. I have 2 or 3 questions there. Oh, and I see the audience is engaging. Carlos also put some, Jan shared some things about, so how did marketeers prove their belonging before digital attribution existed, and then Carlos sharing that marketing should provide framework to sales. Sarah shared like really great that, believes that attribution isn't broken, it's more that we are trying to chase instant results instead of long-term, momentum with trackable. David, you've been reading the chat and see all of this conversation. What is your final take on this topic? And again, we started with that. We went on a little bit of a tangent, but we're talking about attribution being broken, how marketing proves its value. You heard Jolene's point and Clark's point. What's your final take on this?
Yeah. Ouch. I'm inherently a tech optimist. I've been in this space for 25 years. I met my wife through Facebook, for Christ's sake, I'm definitely not a Luddite, and I feel like we're having the same discussions as we were having 10 years ago about SEO. People were against it. They said it wasn't A/B testing, rapid experimentation, programmatic. Now I'm having these discussions about synthetic data. If anything, I think this is empowering for us humans more than anything. And I come from a service design background, right? Jobs to be done, positioning, brand, customer pain, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really not about replacing people. It's really about replacing tasks. And it's so empowering. And it's actually quite beautiful. You feel so empowered. Like, Clark, you have a super strong voice, right? You have a very original voice, a little bit aggressive, a little bit sarcastic. This tech, it's a catalyst. It's an amplifier of something, of an already existing voice, brand, jobs to be done. So our jobs are actually 10 times more exciting. Whatever role, whatever title you put on it in 5 years, the ones who will own sort of the decision making will be the ones who are able to leverage this new tech that I'm telling you, it's absolutely groundbreaking. It's like, remember Space Odyssey? When they're given like it's Prometheus. It's Promethean. It's really like we've just discovered fire again. Super scary, super scary. Just like with these new S curves. So I think that's important. If anything, it's a catalyst and it's an amplifier of an already good or bad taste, of an already strong or a weak voice, of an already weak or a strong brand. Look at the new AI native startups and scale-ups that are coming. So like I said, I have a venture studio, and in the venture studio, we're doing everything AI first, AI native, right? Imagine that we will only have 2-3 people working on this venture next year, and we want to hit 10 million, 50 million ARR, which basically it's not about the ARR. It's really about, can we reach the maximum amount of people with the right product to make their lives better? It's a bit corny, but that's why we're in the CMO role in the end. We failed our psychology career, so now we're sort of CMOs, right? It just works, and when used wisely, it's powerful. On the attribution piece, I think that's a lot of laziness. I completely disagree. I think marketing attribution isn't dead at all. It's evolving. I guess we're not dealing with the same types of budgets, but if you're working with a 10, 50, 100 million yearly budget going through Meta or through the search platforms, you definitely want to know how to optimize those campaigns. And I think while last click models have outlived their usefulness, sure, there's now sophisticated multi-touch and probabilistic approaches, so MTA, MMM, that remain crucial for understanding channel impact and optimizing these budgets. Sure. And I completely agree, we're back to marketing mix modeling, and there's ways to do multi-touch attribution that work today to track down clicks, assists, etc. I don't believe that 2020 was the cookie apocalypse and the attribution apocalypse. However, there's a certain threshold where it doesn't work, and that's according to budget and the team size that you have. So in that case, the incumbents, the larger players, have an advantage. I work on a bunch of MMM and TA projects, and we see it that the smaller players is just more complicated for them. But there's great solutions out there where the budget isn't gigantic. And last point, I do agree with Clark's point. A lot of the time, just asking where did you hear about us, and a lot of our intuition is already quite correct. A lot of the time, that fast brain. But when you're dealing with massive budgets, it just doesn't cut it for the CFO and for the CEO and for the
I do agree with you, David. For me, the only thing that's missing here is like attribution is not dead at all. But I think a lot of non-marketeers don't know what attribution is or how it works, and they still refer back to last click attribution. I think there's a thing
100%.
that we need to also do internal marketing on how to explain how attribution works. I think that's where the biggest crux is. Like, we don't know how to tell people how attribution works, because still a lot of marketeers also just look at last click attribution. So
they
I
use
think
the platform data, right? They just
exactly.
use what's being
They look
fed
at like, here's my Google AdWords, and here are my goals, and this
it
works.
all. Yeah.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of times marketeers forget how to market themselves.
Yeah. Speaking about marketeers marketing themselves, because I'm seeing the chat and I'm seeing an interesting take there. And I'm going to go to job titles. I know that job titles doesn't matter, jobs to be done, tasks, etc. But humans are still humans, and especially at least for the next couple of years, people like to have like the job title ownership is not going to go away, at least for now. There's a reason why suddenly there is a chief revenue officer rising in the last couple of years. Even if it's just like a fancy name to say chief sales officer, just sounded nice to have revenue. But isn't the situation we are in that sort of like sales, marketing, and to a certain extent even like go-to-market or customer success, depending on the business, they are all just fighting for the chief revenue officer role of the future? Isn't just marketeers trying to own or try to fight for that, or they don't have sales expertise, and isn't sales trying to fight for that, but they don't own them, they don't understand the marketing angles of how to generate leads, momentum, brand. Isn't that just a situation where everyone? Yeah.
I want to ask for clarification on your question before I unchain myself. What do you mean by like the ways in which marketing is viewing that CRO position, or sales is viewing that CRO position? Like, can you be specific?
Yeah. Essentially, from the past couple of years, the most traditional C-level, let's put it that way, will always have like a CMO, and a CCO, or a chief commercial officer. They'll always be kind of hand in hand. Typically, the CMO is sometimes very much towards the brand messaging and taking on this new demand generation, this attribution, all these that are happening. I think with the last couple of years, you can see more and more B2B marketeers getting really close to sales. Not that they own sales, not that they own revenue, but they are closer and closer to sales on the process, which means that you kind of are almost through the whole situation from awareness up to closing the deal. You're just not on that final stage where you pass on the lead and then sales takes over. That's the traditional model. I guess to the account executive, thank you, marketing, we'll take it from here. And it creates a lot of friction, yeah? What I've noticed when talking to a few of the recent boards and VCs was that they just don't believe in the CMO CCO split anymore, and thus, in the last years we see more.
What does that mean? What does don't believe in it mean?
That they want someone that manages the whole funnel, someone that looks from the awareness up until actually expansion and upsell, not even just closing the deal, even further. And you start seeing like, the it was like CCO, like now called CRO in some B2B SaaS, that basically owns marketing, sales, and customer success. And now this is just like, like a perception, or like not like a foolproof, not like an absolute term. It's just more, there is a rise of a chief revenue officer. Isn't a lot of the friction that is happening today on the CMO role is because the CMO role won't exist if a CRO exists. If you have a CRO that owns all the journey, if you have a CRO that owns all the journey, what do you need another C-level owning marketing for at all?
The problem most of the time is that the CRO or CCO is done by sales 9 out of 10 times, and they miss that creative, authentic angle, a lot of them. And I think that's where you have the mismatch. Is it called a CMO or whatever? Does it need to be in leadership? Yes, because it's your brand and how you position yourselves. I would love to see a CMO step up to a CRO role instead of the other way around. Because a good salesperson, good RevOps person you could always get, but somebody who understands the whole funnel and the buyer is harder to find, in my opinion.
The buyer. That's really the crux of this, because if you're, you bring up a really good point about, being called up to the majors. Like it is always a salesperson that's going to be a CRO, like in the majority of cases. The issue there is that no one, find me one human being that got into marketing because they wanted to be a CRO. I'll wait. It's because those are two completely different brains. When it comes to how you approach generating revenue or pipeline tactically, on one hand, people that are trained in marketing and long-term sustainable brand building and buyer psychology and qualitative research, you have those people on one side that are approaching this from an actual human interest point of view, with authenticity, with empathy, and trying to really get to know and their audience, their buyers. That's what marketers do or should do. On the other hand, tactically speaking, and of course there are outliers and different schools of thought, but if we're drawing a line in the sand is like high level tactical approaches to this, the CRO side, the sales side, are the ones that are trying to automate everything, trying to figure out who people are before they even consent to being identified, before they even know anything about your brand, and have just turned the entire process that marketers have spent their entire careers trying to improve, because they know the value of building those actual relationships from a place of trust and honesty in earnest. They're the ones that are ruining that by pushing all of our buyers away as fast as humanly possible, because we're just automating cold outreach to people en masse. Like that's why attribution is becoming more and more and more of a problem, which of course then leads to vendors trying to come up with the next thing to convince you that they've solved that problem, where no one's talking about the fact that all of these other tactics are what's actually driving the buyer away. If you the solution to that
Clark,
is a marketer.
Clark, how would your ideal world look like?
My ideal what?
World. How would you see it? Like, I would love to hear, like, how would you see a CMO, a salesperson? Would you have one person? Like, how would you then see it?
Boundaries and respect, and just like respect for like each other's craft. I can't close a deal to save my life. I'm not in sales, but I look at that the same way as I do like defining MQLs and stuff like that. It doesn't matter how we define it. It just matters that we agree on it. And so, going back to I think what David may have mentioned earlier about like titles not matter. Titles exist for a reason. Like there's all this rhetoric around alignment, which of course is inherently great. We all need alignment. We all need to be, on the same ship in the right direction. But that's not to say that everything should just become this one growth at all cost, revenue over just sanity and mental health above all, when we have people that have trained their entire lives and spent their entire year or their careers becoming really, really good at their craft. And so, long walk for a short drink of water. I know, but I love that question, because I would love to be able to. I think anybody would love to be able to sit here and come up with a solution, or say that they even know. I'll be the first one to say something that probably no one else will. I don't know. I really don't know what it looks like, but I know that the way it's going, the way it is, the way those two sides of the fence are operating with each other, where things are trending with AI and all that nonsense, that there's a pretty clear brick wall coming soon.
Okay, interesting. Before we get another David, we might want to bring you in, but before we bring you in, because we know we have 15 minutes left, and I see that the audience has quite a few they have a lot more comments than questions. I see there's things like what role does a new CMO play in product development. We'll see if we can try to get to those, but I actually want to have one where Jolene has the chance to open, and it's a little bit more on the detail, but because there was a few conversations about performance, there is already like quite a few conversations on every channel is saturated. Every performance channel is saturated. I think there was even like an article recently from Andrew Chen on how he also feels that in his portfolio at A16, I think it's at A16, that every channel is saturated and he's just going through it. So, it comes again the question of like, is brand a less true mode, and is that even a thing? And maybe I bring you, Jolene, that you can get started on this one, and then let Clark and David rebut or share
Yeah.
that.
I do think brand is the one that's going to set everything apart. I think like maybe for another time, but the death of SaaS might be another good discussion to have, because I do think at one point everybody's going to build their own. I just heard about a company that completely took away Intercom and built out their own support integration system through Lovable. So interesting to see what's going to happen there. But yeah, once you can copy and building products is easier. Now with Lovable and all the other tools, it's going to get more and more easy. Building content, building everything around that is going to be with the click of a button. But if you look at the B2C market, I think that's still a good reference to look at. If you want to buy a good champagne bottle, you want a champagne bottle because you want the brand. If you want a Nike, you buy the Nike. You can buy the Adidas. You can buy sneakers from no brand, but you choose to pay $150 for your Nike because you want a Nike. Like that's the only thing that's going to set us apart is the brand. Okay. That's why I think it's the last stretch. And I think B2B is not going to be different.
Okay, David, Clark?
I think we're doing Battle Royale, right?
Yeah,
I think that's
go ahead.
I think it's a ridiculous statement to say that brand is the last true mode. I think it's maybe the most ridiculous statement we've used today. I'm just playing along, yeah?
Go.
So a few things. First of all, I think a lot of vendor selection is going to happen through LLMs, unfortunately, moving forward, agent to agent. You're already seeing it. Hire a consultant, asking them what vendor you should be using for a B2B enterprise solution. They're going to use an LLM for that vendor selection. And so that agentic optimization is going to be something so important. I agree, not Nike, not Louis Vuitton, Moët Chandon, all that stuff, not for the lifestyle products. Brand is still important. By the way, if you look at marketing attribution, you see that companies like Nike, Adidas, they found out that performance marketing was actually hurting them for the past years, and they went full on brand. I'm all in on brand. I completely agree, but I don't believe that it's the last true mode. I don't even believe that for most companies, it's actually a strong mode, because humans are not going to be making decisions a lot of the time. It's dystopian, I agree, but we, as humans, we have something called, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's optimal foraging theory. As animals, we're hardwired to look for the path of least resistance, to try to get as much as possible, like with as little effort as possible. We tend to maximize gain while minimizing effort, and that's what these LLMs offer us, right? Book a holiday, to choose a product, apart if it's a sort of a social status product. I think there's a lot of moats left. Like I said, so in the venture studio we set up, we do partnerships. The reason we do partnerships is some partners, some incumbents have incredible moats that are really hard to circumvent, or that are moaty, right? The definition of a moat. So one of them is like exclusive data, proprietary data sets that no one else can have access to or replicate. So if your models, or if you're learning from a proprietary data set, something unique, you have an edge. Physical resources, like these real world constraints, regulatory captor, love it or hate it, regulatory approval creates fantastic moats, right? If you work with the big four, if you work with ESG companies, et cetera, et cetera. Partnerships, that's a big one. That allows you to have really strong distribution. Sometimes partnerships take like a year to set up. Deep partnerships, they get access to exclusive data, resources, customers. Supply chain control. I work with a few supply chain companies. They have massive moats. Network effect still to a certain extent. The fact that
it's still a lot of data sets you're talking about, like access to data sets. Not so much like why is somebody going to choose you over something else? And of course, your LLM can inform you, but in the one end, it's not going to make your decision.
Right. That's like my question for David is, what type of vendors are you talking about? Are you talking about like marketing tech vendors? Are we talking like who gets fired when an AI picks the wrong $100,000 ABM platform?
why would they pick the wrong platform?
Why would they not?
Because there's always a human in the loop. So they're assisting you.
Yeah, but so in the end, the human chooses, right?
Oh, 100%. Like I said, it's human in the loop, human as a guardrail. But what does that have to do with brand? Like 80% of there was a really nice post the other day. It was looking at like this guy mapped out the default infra choices across popular AI app builders now, and everybody's using AI app builders, right? And tools like VO, Vercel, Lovable are increasingly choosing infrastructure automatically, because somebody doesn't want to. When somebody wants to build an app nowadays, like the companies coming out of YC, for example, they're not asking like, okay, let's find a tool to deploy, a tool for a database, a tool for the object storage, a tool for authentication, a tool for payments, a tool for analytics, a tool for feature flags, a tool for email, a tool for code management, a tool for messaging. No, that's bundled into VO, Replit, Agent, Bolt, Lovable. So guess who's making the decisions there? It's these agentic forces.
How is it different? How is it different from a human just Googling it and doing their own research? Like, how is that? Like, how? I'm assuming what you're implying.
How is it different?
Is that the reason you would be using AI and agentic things to help assist in making these sort of big vendor buying decisions? Like, okay, like how does that move the needle?
It's 10 times faster and 10 times better output. So it allows us to do our job much more rapidly. I think something like SEO, for example, is going to become antiquated function, and that more and more organizations are going to design for bots, not for people. We're in AI mode now. Search is no longer a human typing a keyword and clicking a link. These LLMs are taking over the consideration phase. That's what all the data is showing.
But what if like in the next 3 years, because we're looking in the future, all the products are quite similar. You are still prompting AI to say, hey, I need this, or I need something like this. Help me make my decision. If everything is the same, what is then the only differentiator that you have is the familiarity, it's a hard word for me to say as a non-English speaker, with the brand. Right? If you see 3, of which one of 3 you've seen through content or ads through one of these things because you've seen the brand, you will pick that one.
I agree, brand is important. I'm all in on brand. I just don't think it's the last available mode. Somebody said brand is the last true mode.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Regulatory capture, proprietary data, network effects, key partnerships. If I'm like a CFO or a CEO of a company, I'd invest in those today. Not more than brand, but it's definitely on my radar.
I agree. That for me, it's not the last mode, but it's the mode that's going to drive the decision.
That's possible.
That's for me what I like. I agree with you that there are different channels and different things, and with AI, new channels will pop up, definitely.
Yeah.
But for me, the only decision you're going to make is based on the familiarity with the brand. Why do I keep on using that word?
Maybe, but for me, Jolene, you're a brand of you're a voice of reason for me, so I'll accept that.
I'm still hung up on the whole AI agentic thing. Like, how is that even like? How is that different than just returning a cursory Google search on certain vendors? Like, what is it actually doing? Because everything that I've heard from you so far, no marketer is saying what you're saying. The only people that are saying what you're saying are people that have a product to push that does exactly what you're saying is going to be the way things are going to trend.
Okay, so clip this. Let's look at it in 2 years. It will have aged like milk. That's it. It's all I'm saying. Like most of the consideration phase for vendors is happening on LLMs at the moment. So the new UX is Markdown and JSON. And if no marketeers are saying it's because I'm to some extent, well, no, that's presumptuous. So jury's out. Let's look at this one in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild because like that's kind of what I'm talking about, of like marketers being the ones that are actually able to decipher and get down to actual buying behavior. Because like I get your perspective. I totally get it. If I had an AI agentic tool to do all that, that's exactly what I'd think too. But it's like, that's not human behavior. Is not how human beings buy things. That is not how human beings that are CMOs are going to spend $100,000-$200,000 on a tool and just be like, well, the LLM said this. I guess I'll just like.
No, but you're doing a
What?
caricature. It's already happening. If you look at vendor selection from consultants or from CMOs today, at least the ones I work with, a lot of the vendor selection is happening through deep research, either on. So, have you ever tried deep research on one of the LLMs? Do you pay for like Plus or for Ultra accounts?
I do almost every day.
Okay, so one of the use cases for that is vendor selection, and we're seeing that a lot more vendor selection. The first filtering, at least, is happening through these through these models. Who in their right mind is going to Google for a potential vendor just to come up with like a G2 link and go check a G2 platform? It just doesn't make sense anymore. You get a much more nuanced. It's co-intelligence. It's like we used to have calculators for calculation. Now we have a second brain for wording, for decision making.
So it just makes Googling faster and makes it neater, so you can have a comprehensive report on it.
I mean, that's basically, it's more powerful search, right? Yes.
But I love it. I love that. You're right. That's all it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you.
Let's see. As I said, I think it'll be fun to see in not even 2 years. I think a year and a half, we're going to see it interesting there.
Put this one in 9 months.
Yeah. But funny enough, two things here that are interesting, but there's more from my angle, keep taking out a bit of the host. Funny enough, I had conversations with the vendors, the marketing vendors that we all love and hate. But fun fact is that in trying to sell servers, the last two vendors I talked to, funny enough, were the Gartner and Forresters of this world. And both of them actually did put like their own statistics of saying, hey, generative AI is gonna, 90% of people are doing LLM research to select their vendors. So both of them actually are putting some numbers behind. 90% seem quite high, but okay, let's assume that. The fun fact afterwards say, of course, and for, we can actually help you make sure that you rank high on the LLM algorithm. And I was like, oh, nice twist for selling some more, 100K service on top. But we don't have time to go to discuss bias, because bias will have been quite an interesting one, in terms of like how we educate AI to give also a bias answer. And it already happened to me, actually, interesting enough, that's between selecting Replit, Lovable, Bolt, and all of these ones, the LLM actually gave me not the best choice for what I wanted to build. And actually, funny enough, one was better than the other for a specific thing I was looking for. But again, training. Let's see where it gets. One last one, because you're on the clock, and I want to finish good with everyone. But there was one I wanted to have a conversation generally on, and maybe David, I'll take one last one for you to open, which is one that came also you mentioned, but also came on the chat, which is, with all the AI, entry-level marketing is dead. I know I had to use a one is dead kind of situation statement, because everyone loves those or hates those. So because of AI automation, hyper-specialization, the junior marketeer is gone. Or at least makes it quite hard. So it has to be quick, because I don't want to stretch the audience here. But your thoughts on it in the most practical sense that you can, with the rest to reboot.
Is it for me? Because I actually have a hard stop.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh yeah.
That's why I'm saying.
But I agree on the fact that I completely agree on the fact that the signal versus noise in terms of what's taken out of the LLMs. That's why I run a closed circle community. Yeah? It's so that we identify the noise versus the signal. I'm just very worried for entry-level positions. I think the job market in the future is going to be extremely scattered. The organizations I've seen are not looking for juniors anymore. It's happening for entry-level coders. Like, how do we get into marketing positions? We usually start through social media positions. Maybe those are still available, but look at some of the automation platforms that are available. So I'm very worried for entry-level positions, and I actually make it my job to try to coach juniors. and coach them up really fast and give them opportunities, because I don't know. That's one that scares me. And if anything, I believe that the job market's going to be a lot more scattered in the future. So there will be less hiring. We'll be able to do more with less, and it's our responsibility to build ourselves up. And people entering the workforce will actually have to position themselves as entrepreneurs or productize themselves. You see this, there's a lot of studies coming out about the white collar recession at the moment, the white collar recession. And MBA grads, a lot of them, when asked, are having a lot of trouble to find jobs, a lot more than before. So entry level and MBA grads. And if anything, there was a survey that was published 2 weeks ago. They wish they'd bought a business rather than paying 100K to get an MBA. So they wish they bought a business on acquire.com. And I believe that the world will be a scattered, sort of a scattered landscape of much smaller organizations, but much more niche and verticalized. That's kind of my 2 cents on that one. Companies are going to hire way less. It's already happening. Okay. And we're blaming the recession on it and inflation, but it's happening.
Okay.
Good news is we'll create more jobs. Like with any tech revolution, a lot of new jobs will be created. That's it.
All right. Clark, Jolene, any final things on this one? Do you also have the same tendency?
I agree.
You think,
I find it hard, but I agree. I think, but there will be something else that pops up that always when there's a revolution or something changes to the workforce, something else will pop up. So at one point it will be fine. For me, the most important thing is that universities learn to adapt to this, because that's my biggest worry. We're still getting learned. We still learn the same way we did the last 100 years, which is
which historically universities always adapt quite quickly. Clark,
I am kind of weary about entry level marketers, just considering the way things have been going, the conversations that people are having. But I don't necessarily think they're going anywhere. There's a big difference between actual marketing and what people think AI can do for marketing. AI is not going to replace entry-level marketing. It's the only thing AI is going to do is make shitty marketing scale faster.
All right, I'll wrap up on that one. David, you have to go. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, I also have a hard stop.
Great format, super raw.
Yes, I loved it. Thank you so much.
I love it.
Share comments. I'll share all the links for everyone. These are recorded. I'll send them snippets.
Love all you guys.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you.
Super fun.
Thanks. Cheers.